Suicide is the leading Suicide is the leading cause of death amongst our returned service men and women. In Australia, 44% of women and 42% of men that die after their service die by suicide. 44 and 42%. It's almost half. So think of a formation of soldiers. Pull out 40%, almost half of those soldiers, 1 in 2, and those deaths are attributed to suicide. Soldiers coming back from war should have our respect, should have our protection, and yet we're letting our soldiers down. Today is November the 11th, and I want to take a moment to remember these veterans in my own way by talking about them. So let's do that now. Let's dive in. Let's see what happens. Welcome to Mark My Words. Mark My Words is the story of my journey from a place where I was shattered to where I could live again. Right now, it's the 11th day. It's almost the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. This was the day that World War I finished, 1918. It quickly became a remembrance day, a day to remember the fallen, and which is good and proper. The only problem that can come from that I can see is that many of the veterans that come home don't feel like they are remembered in that equation. Now, we also have Anzac Day in Australia, Australian-New Zealand Army Corps Day, the date of the landing of Gallipoli, 1915. And that's a day to remember our veterans. But so often we think about the lost, again, which is right and proper. But I think it's important to remember the veterans that came home, wounded and unwounded. And I mentioned that statistic at the top of all the deaths after service. 44% of those deaths are by suicide for women, 42% for men. Why are these veterans dying? Why are they choosing to take their own lives? I understand a part of it. I never had the honor of being a soldier. In fact, at my brother's passing out parade when he graduated as being a fully fledged soldier, a corporal was reaming him out. It's just going him and calling him all sorts of names. And my father over the years had tried to explain to me why he never suggested I join the army or any of the armed services. Anyway, I saw my brother being reamed out and I got mad. My fists were clenched. I was going to go over. I was going to sort this guy out. He doesn't get to speak to my little brother like that. My father was there. My mother, they were both wearing their medals. And I was about to get up and I felt this death grip on my arm. And it was my father. And he said, "Mate, don't do anything." Now, out of respect for my dad, of course I didn't do anything. But we were driving home and Dad goes, "Remember that little, when you got upset?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That's why I've never suggested that you join the military. You would have got reamed out by the first corporal, seen it as being unjust, and you would have decked them, and then you would have got in trouble." Clearly, I was not built to be a soldier. What's that got to do with anything? Well, first, it has to do with my respect for soldiers. They do and did and do stuff that I could never do. Yeah, I could jump out of planes, I could do whatever the job is, but I don't have the mental fortitude to have been able to deal with the bureaucracy of the army, the way they treat people. I couldn't have done it. How can I possibly understand what a soldier goes through? Well, before I was hurt, before I got my mental illness, I was in a well-respected field. I was working with people with disability, and I was helping people to learn to deal with negative behaviors, behavioral modification expert. I was well-respected. I was trusted. I was seen as an expert in my field. And then the day came that I got hurt. And to give you context, I still can't be in the room with somebody that has a disability. It just triggers me. And I never really understood triggers. I thought they were just weakness. But they're your fight or flight response to a certain stimuli that you can't help. That's what a trigger is for me. What happened when I lost my job, when I got hurt, is I couldn't go back to my field. I couldn't go back to this job that I loved, that I was good at, that I was respected at. I wasn't that anymore. That's not who I was anymore. And a lot of my personality was tied up in that. A lot of my self-esteem was tied up in my job. I don't sell things. I don't make billionaires richer. I look after people. I was really proud of that. Now extrapolate that for a soldier. A soldier comes into the military. They decide that they can deal with all the bits and bobs that come with it. And then they gain respect. And then they teach them to lead, and they get more respect, and then they get more authority. And it becomes who they are. And we do that to soldiers. You're a Marine. Once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. Old soldiers never die. They just fade away. No such thing as an ex-soldier. When you become a soldier, that's who you are. So imagine what it's like one day when you have to take the uniform off for the last time. Now, if you've done 30 years service, then it's a well-earned break. But if you're a young person and maybe the army doesn't suit you anymore, but more likely you're unwell, you're unfit to be a soldier, medically unfit, such a horrible term. Medically wounded, maybe, not medically unfit. They're not unfit to be soldiers. They're damaged. They're hurt. And then one day you say to them, tomorrow, you are no longer a soldier. Once you take that uniform off, it's off forever. I mean, that's got to be a psychological wound for anybody in any circumstance, let alone somebody that's carrying wounds that people can't see. My brother once said to me, he wishes that his arm had got blown off, or his legs, or a scar or something. Because even though he was medically discharged from the military for various wounds, you can't see them. It's his back, it's his hearing, it's his mental health. And that's the big one. Because the thing about mental health is you can't quantify it. See, if you lose a limb, you know what the path to recovery is. You know what your limitations are going to be going forward. You understand the fact that your wound has now changed your life, but you can quantify how. When you live with a mental illness, all of a sudden, you can't go to the shops because there's too many people. Will I ever be able to go to the shops? How do I get past that? Will exposure therapy work for me? Will CBT work for me? What will work for me? Whereas you lose a limb, physio, doctors, more physio, more therapy. We're going to get it to the point where there's no pain in your leg. You're going to have to use this prosthesis, but you'll have a normal life. We don't have that with mental health. There is no end in sight when it comes to mental health. I understand what it's like to lose who you are as a person, lose your identity, lose what makes you you. And for many soldiers, that's what we do. One day they're a soldier, the next day, see you later. Now, it'd be different if we were like, okay, you served, you've been diagnosed with something, great. We're going to give you all the care that we can. But they don't do that to soldiers. You leave the army and then you're on your own. You have to figure out how to get the support that the army's supposed to give you. For many soldiers, this is traumatic and frustrating. And I've watched two of my relatives go through it, my dad and my brother. It is not an easy process, but it should be. You're diagnosed with a wound, then surely, psychologically, whatever, okay, that's your wound, great. We're going to work with you for the rest of your life till that's fixed. If you lose a limb, you get support forever. Whatever it is you need, wheelchairs, therapy, we'll look after it because we can look at it and say, you don't have a leg. We can look at it and say, you don't have a leg. But with somebody with a psychological injury, we don't know when it's going to get better or if it can get better. So we sweep it under the rug. I want to take this Remembrance Day to remember our soldiers and the fact that we need to save them. We need to do better for them. We need to let them know that we care. Now, if you're a veteran watching this, you need to understand that my respect for you is immense. But let's take my brother. My brother cannot see why I respect him. He holds up his medals. And see, he was in a non-combatant role. He was Raimi, for the army people that are wondering. Now, we thought that meant that when the Bushmasters broke down or they needed a service, he would be there in the base looking after them. We didn't understand that when they break down out of the base or in the fire bases, he would have to go out to them. And the thing of it is being a Raimi guy, didn't have a gun in his hands. Sure, he had his rifle, but his tool of trade was his spanners, his wrenches, his pliers. So he'd be out in the heat of battle or just out in the boonies, completely surrounded by soldiers protecting him so he can fix something. He's in that area holding a spanner. The other soldiers are holding rifles. They can actively defend themselves. Of course, there's trauma in all of this, but please, for my brother, he thinks I look at his medals and I think of him like a hero of battle, somebody that won a Victoria Cross, an Albert Jacka. And I don't see that. I look at his medals and I see a guy that did a job that his country asked him to do. Our country asked him to put his life on the line, and he said, okay, I will do that. But when I look at my brother's medals, I don't love him because of those medals. I love him because he's my brother. I'm proud of the fact that the government of my country honored him. I mean, who gets medals anymore? Olympic sports people, and the military. And we look at the sports people, the Olympics, we go, yes, they've achieved something. We'll look at soldiers and say, yes, they've achieved something that is worth recognizing. I look at my brother's medals. I don't see a hero, a guy that, charged the Germans in the jungles of Gallipoli. I see a guy that did a job that I couldn't do. I was unable to do. Now, something else about that. I don't love my brother because of his medals. I love my brother because he's my brother. I will always be proud of him. I will always love him. We've almost lost him a couple of times to suicide. We didn't understand until my brother came home that my grandfather also had PTSD, had psychological illness. He never acknowledged it, never mentioned it, never sought help for it, and self-medicated. And of course, drinking and mental illness is not a way to fix it. And it led to an incredible divide between him and his kids. But by the time his grandkids came along, he kind of got control of it. And I loved my grandfather. He was an unbelievable dude. When he passed away, my mum and my uncle they couldn't see past the pain. Couldn't see past his pain and the way he tried to deal with it. We need to do better for our soldiers, men and women, service people. We need to tell them that the identity of a soldier, and we tell them, old soldiers never die. There's no such thing as an old Marine. They're just the Marines, they're soldiers, they're service people. Yes, it's something that they did. And yes, it was important. And yes, it was valid. But it's not who they are. And the mental illness that you're facing, just like I faced severe mental illness. I'm a suicide survivor, lived with symptoms for 20 years, still living with them today. I lost who I was, but I found a new person to be. I found new hope, new purpose. You may have lost, you think, your sense of self-worth, of dignity, of respect, but that's not the case. Now, there are many people in our society that don't understand that. That's okay. But there's a few of us that understand completely and respect you, love you, and hope that if you're struggling, please don't be a statistic that somebody talks about on some random podcast. Take that courage that you had to become a soldier, to stay a soldier, to serve as a soldier. Take that courage and say, you know what? I need some help. Today is Remembrance Day. We remember the fallen, but we also remember those that come home. I want to share with you just another little anecdote. I wasn't going to do this, but I will. I went to the Australian War Memorial with my brother to check out the Afghanistan exhibition. And it was beautiful. Talked about ramp ceremonies, burials of soldiers, to the families of soldiers, talking about the loss. Did a beautiful job of expressing remorse and remembrance and respect for them. But as I looked around, I was with my brother, who was also a veteran, and I was like, there's not really a lot here to educate, because I see the War Memorial as a place of education. I used to go to a school that was right beside the War Memorial. Now, whenever I was wagging school or truant, I was at the Australian War Memorial. I was reading plaques. I was looking at dioramas. I was in minute detail learning. I turned to my brother at the end of this Afghanistan exhibition, and he just looked at me and goes, did I even serve there? What about me? What about the job that I did? See, most of the veterans are not going to be recognized in the memorial in a formal way. Yeah, the guys that have passed away get their name on the wall, right and proper. But when my brother walked around, when I walked around, it was like, where was his service? He was there too. He was doing a job. Not just these fellas that passed away. And again, no disrespect at all in any way, sense of the word. I just looked around and I was like, mate, I'd love to know what my brother did. And I asked him, and he showed a few maps, and he was like, oh, I was here and this is what we did. And these are the Afghans that we worked with. And it was amazing. And it was, yeah, we should remember the dead, the fallen. But let's take a moment to remember those that are still around, those that live on with injuries that we will never be able to see. I am going to leave it there. Again, 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month is a day that I will always have respect for. It's the way I was brought up. But for any veterans that are listening to this, that might listen to this, please know you have my respect. I honor you. And if you're struggling with your mental health, as somebody that's been through severe mental health issues, it is just a bump in the road. Sure, it might be Mount Everest, but it's not the end of your story. It doesn't have to be the end. I want to thank you for checking out Mark My Words. Like, share, and subscribe if you would. Otherwise, I very much look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Mark My Words. I'd like to thank my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And I can't forget the band Adelaide, who allows us to use their song as our theme.